What's up, family? What's up, ladies? How y'all doing? It is your girl, your diva in knowledge, Lady Mocha, representing Mocha's Ladies Lounge. What's good? I want to thank y'all so much. Y'all been sending a lot of ladies to me. Y'all been sending y'all friends. Y'all been sending y'all sisters. I'm so grateful, ladies, that y'all are supporting my channel. It's been kind of dry for a while, but I'm trying to pick up the pace, y'all. I'm constantly trying to get in the mode of uploading content, fresh content. So again, I want to thank y'all ladies so much for supporting me, subscribing to the channel, and sharing my video and bringing your other lady friends over here. I am so grateful. So nevertheless, y'all, I want to get into this right away because I definitely felt this is necessary, because it's a lot of women right now that are putting themselves in these disastrous situations, and it's very important as ladies that no matter how much you love a man, you make sure you cover yourself, you protect yourself, and make sure you got your own back, because you never ever know the day, the time, or the hour when these men are going to do flip mode on you after you have put so much time, after you invested so much of your energy, children, everything into building the future with them, only for them to turn around and throw egg in your face and throw it all away to be with another woman. So this happens very frequently. We've seen Wendy Williams go through it. We've seen Mary J. Blige go through it with her ex-husband, Kendu Isaacs. So this is something that's very, very common. Tiger Woods' wife also went through the embarrassment. Elin Woods, so we see this all the time, you know what I mean? So this is nothing new under the sun. But as much as we see it, you still have some women that are very blindfolded and have this attitude that it can't never happen to me. And me personally, I don't like women like that who have this attitude that it'll never happen to me. I'm too good for this to ever happen to. My husband is so wonderful and so perfect. He's not capable of doing this. Only to turn around and get egg thrown in their face. And then they look for sympathy and empathy. So I wanted to go into talking about being a starter wife, and basically women who have been with their husbands from the beginning of time, before these men became successful, before they became wealthy and well off. Behind every good man is a good woman. In other words, most of these men that are successful, they have not done it alone. There's a woman somewhere in the background who has been the backbone of his success, okay? Either she handled the money, either she stayed and kept the kids for him to build and grow his career. She done co-signed him on some loans. She done got her family, her parents to step in, and they even invested finances. In other words, she has contributed in some form or another to her husband's success. And sometimes it pays off. You have women that are still with their successful husbands, like LL Cool J's wife. The rapper Simone is still with her husband to this day. He's never left her side, even when he became successful as a hip-hop artist. Morris Chestnut, the actor, is another one. He's been with his same wife, who's been with him from the beginning of his career. LeBron James. The list goes on. It's a lot of starter wives who've been there from the very beginning and was fortunate enough to still reap the benefits. However, this case does not apply to all women. Like I said, we see what Wendy Williams is going through, Melanie Holt from Love and Marriage and Hip Hop, men who had the audacity to step outside of their marriages, have babies from women that was making power moves, boss women, and got the audacity to get mad because these wives are no longer entitled to financially supporting them. They basically pulled the rug from up under their foot, where they no longer had access to the things that a good husband should be able to enjoy the fruits of the labor thereof. So nevertheless, there's these two women here who definitely are a prime example of when being a starter wife, how it can possibly somehow in some way become the demise of a lot of good women who have been the backbones, who have been very supportive, who held their husbands down from the beginning of time. So I want to share with you these ladies, these two different cases in which you have two beautiful women, Mrs. Clara Harris and Mrs. Betty Broderick. So both of these ladies have two very similar situations. The first thing they both have in common is both of these women were a part of their husband's career, their success. They played a major part in these men becoming successful. And both of them, unfortunately, were left by their husbands for other women who played no part in the journey of their success. And both of these women took matters in their own hands because they were very distraught. And the fact that you finally think you have arrived, you have accomplished something that most women have not been able to accomplish, which means living that American dream, having that white picket fence, the children, a beautiful home. You think you have finally arrived to your destination, only to find out that it has been ripped from up under, ripped literally like the heart out your chest. It was literally ripped and taken from you, basically based off of selfishness and the fact that these men no longer felt they owed these women the rest of their lives. And it took these women to a broken place in which they could not handle the devastation behind these men leaving them. So both of these women both have, murked their husbands in the process. One is still doing time and one just got released in 2018. So I wanted to share both of these stories with y'all. And I also further wanted to share how women end up in these type of situations and what you can possibly do to prevent yourself from becoming a Betty Broderick and a Clara Harris. So I first wanted to start with Betty Broderick. I've done content on her several times. I'm very fascinated with Betty Broderick because this lady was one of the stories that definitely broke America, that perfect American dream white culture myth, that nothing is wrong on the home front, that you can have it all, that you can have the house, you can have the husband, you can have the children, and your life is just centered around this perfect image. And she broke that mold of what everybody thought could never probably happen. She showed that everything is not what it seems. And the reason why her case really was so mainstream was because they had that ideal image of the American dream. There's this beautiful woman with this handsome husband. They have beautiful children. The husband is successful. He's a lawyer. He's a doctor. Their children are living the American dream of being on a soccer team, being a ballerina, everything that a lot of women hopes and dreams and desire to have one day for herself. And just to see that a woman can have all of that and yet get it taken from her and have absolutely no control over it, it just goes to show you that you can never be too sure of yourself, and you can never be envious or jealous of other couples because you never really know what they're going through behind closed doors. And people are going to always present the best parts of themselves. You're never going to really see the nightmares or the skeletons that's really going on behind closed doors until something very devastating happens. And that's what happened to Betty Broderick. Betty Broderick was one of those wives. Keep in mind, this was during the 80s, okay, during the 70s, late 70s, early 80s. So keep in mind, the mindset of wives during that duration is totally different compared to how a lot of women, in most cases, perceive marriage today. So before you knock her submissiveness and her humbleness, and her journey of willing to put her husband on a pedestal. Before you knock it, keep in mind that this is a different time frame. This is a different era compared to how women think today. But during that particular time, during the 70s, women were taught, women were expected to be barefoot and pregnant. They were expected to let the husbands lead, the husbands work, provide, and basically be the overseers of the family, which back then in that era was not necessarily a bad thing, because children had the blessings of having a mother in their home, unlike today where women have to work so much. Children are being raised by nannies, they're raising themselves or being raised by the child care providers. So you can, you know, knock the housewife thing and shun it. But back then, it was actually a really great thing, because children had the blessings of having a father as a provider, but at the same time, their mothers were the ones that were keeping them and babysitting them and nurturing them as well. So children had the best of both worlds. However, with that came the backlash of the man holding the majority of the control, which meant that man had so much power in defeating that wife. But due to the fact that by her not working and by her not having anything going for herself other than just being catering to him and being a mother, which meant if this man was to ever pull a rug from up under her foot, he died, passed away, or in worst case scenario to me, decides to leave you for a younger woman or another woman for that matter, it basically put you in a very bad situation, because you had nothing to fall back on for yourself. You had nothing to catch your back. You had no other cushion. And this is the reason why I think, one of the reasons anyway, why some of these women have taken matters into their own hands, in which they felt like they had to take their husbands' lives, because their lives was based on their husbands. Their lives centered around their husbands. They had no other life other than just being there for their husbands. And any woman who puts herself in this type of position, when these men decide to check out on you, whether through death or whether through selfishness of wanting to be with another woman, it can be very distraught. It's very devastating when you have invested your whole life into this one human being that is probable of failing you, because at the end of the day, these men are just human beings. They're not God. They're not your savior. They can only protect you but so much. You know, whenever you deal with human beings, you have to prepare for the fact that a human being, even your own husband, is bound, is guaranteed to disappoint you in some form or another. You have to give people room to disappoint you. You have to give people room to fail you, because if you don't, and the moment they do, you will definitely jump off the deep end like these women here have, and both of the stories that I'm getting ready to share with you. And that's what Betty Broderick did. And she admitted that during the trial, that she really gave all of her life to Daniel Broderick. Now, to just kind of give y'all a brief scenario on how this marriage came about, how it started, how she met Mr. Broderick, so you can have an idea as to what drove her to this dead end place, as to where she felt, now I have to take him out. We first have to start from the beginning. In order for us to understand the ending, we first have to be aware of the beginning, okay? You got to know how the story started before you know what led to its ending. So I'm going to give y'all a brief summary without having to make it a 2-year session and break it up into series, as to how Betty Broderick met Daniel Broderick. So I want to go a little more in depth with Betty Broderick. So I'm going to do like a a sequence of the different events that led up to this. Now, if y'all haven't already watched the movie, if you have Netflix, there are movies that are based on the actual events of this case. You know, sometimes they embellish a little, but for the most part, both movies are very pretty much head on accurate of the events that transpired in the marriage between Betty Broderick and her husband Daniel Broderick. So if you have Netflix, look up the series Dirty John, and it's more than one series, but go to the one Dirty John, the Betty Broderick story. So you can see it on Netflix. And you can also, if you don't have Netflix, they do have the very first version. That was when Lifetime had the bomb movies out. It is on YouTube for free. It's called Health Had No Fury, or just put in the Betty Broderick movie. I know they have a part 1 and they have the part 2. That was the original before Netflix did their own spin on it. But both movies are good, ladies. So if you check them out, it'll give you an even stronger perception as to what Betty Broderick was going through. So they're really good. It's gonna make you mad now. I ain't gonna lie, but they're really good. Okay, so first things first, they met October 1965. She was 17 years old when she met Daniel. She was invited to a football weekend at the University of Notre Dame, and Dan was just beginning his senior year there. I was looking forward to starting medical school. So basically, according to Betty, Dan told his friends that Betty was the woman he really wanted to marry. Although Dan later on tried to dispute this, you know, when he was doing his dirt with a new woman, but that's another story. So 1966, Dan moves to New York and starts dating Betty. They didn't start their relationship immediately until after their first meeting, but a year later, Dan did move to New York and took Betty out, and that is pretty much when they started connecting. The instant I saw him, she said, it was like a lightning bulb. So it was a lot of passion initially from the beginning. So April 12th, 1969, Betty and Dan tied the knot after dating for just over 2.5 years. They got married, and Dan proved to be stubborn at the wedding and refused to wear a formal suit, much to Betty's mom's disapproval. Aside from clothing, Betty revealed that her parents approved of Dan, as she told San Diego Reader, because she was basically marrying a doctor. You know, what parent wouldn't want that? So basically, you know, her family was very accepting of Dan, and over time it seemed that trouble quickly started brewing, as Betty mentioned to San Diego Reader. So anyway, January 1970, they welcomed their first child. Betty got pregnant rather quickly after their honeymoon, and that's when they had their first daughter, Kimberly, who was born prematurely. They were pretty much kind of struggling for the most part, but Dan was still striving to become a doctor, and of course Betty Broderick was still determined to be that down chick, dedicated with him regardless of what. Basically, she stated how they literally had nothing, not even a single diaper or shirt to put down, you know, nowhere to put on their daughter, you know. But nevertheless, she still supported Dan with the school. Betty was reportedly forced to earn money by babysitting for other couples, and along with caring for her own child. So basically, Betty did whatever she had to do to make sure that Danny was going to fulfill the dream for both of them. Okay, so July 1971, Betty gives birth to a second daughter, and Dan goes to Harvard. So Dan applied to Harvard to study law after realizing he didn't want to practice medicine. He planned to specialize in the medical practice field. So once the couple moved to Somerville, Massachusetts, that is when Betty began really feeling really isolated. She was pregnant for the second time, economically strapped and envious of Dan's involvement in the world. She again wanted out, but she hung on. So at this point, she's seeing Dan making all of these moves, and all she was doing was just being a housewife and taking care of children. So she basically felt like her life was at a halt, while constantly seeing Dan, you know, you know, move around and be out amongst the world. Basically, Dan had a social life, and Betty didn't have much anything going for her, just trying to support him. Okay, so anyway, their daughter Lee arrived in July 1971. She also became pregnant with a third child, but that child died at birth. This all occurred while Dan was studying at Harvard. Okay, so 1973, Dan graduates and the family moves to San Diego. So Betty felt the tables turned during the 4 years she'd been married to Dan. It went from being accomplished, well connected, and free to being isolated from family and friends and trapped with 2 children whom she was 100% responsible for. Meanwhile, Dan found his ground, his footing with the legal community, joining San Diego law firm Gray, Carey, Ames and Fry law firm. Excuse me. 1976, Dan and Betty welcome a son, Daniel, the 4th, I believe, or the 5th, the child's 3rd child and first son, born 1976. Around this time, they purchased their very first home together. The mother of 3 continued to work nights as a cashier and a hostess at a Black Angus restaurant. So again, now there's 3 children, and Betty is still holding his ass down while he's, going to school, while he's, partaking in his law firm, and she's still having to hold the fort down. 1979, Broderick had a 4th child. The youngest of Dan and Betty, Rhett, was born 1979, my year. Cracks started to form in the couple's marriage between 1979 and 1983. Money was no longer an issue for the Brodericks at this period in time. Dan and Betty were joining country clubs and private resorts reserved for the elite. Their children apparently attended private schools, vacations were plentiful, and family owned a selection of prestige cars. However, the couple's marriage was slowly but surely deteriorating. Mighty funny, huh? Once he started making that bread, it got to his head, ladies. Nevertheless, 1990, Betty's daughter Kim told Los Angeles Times Mom would get mad at Dad all the time. Once Mom picked up the stereo and threw it at him, and she locked him out constantly. He'd come around to my window, whisper, "Kim, let me in." So I think at this point, Betty was building up a lot of frustration, because at this point now he's making the money. Everything is supposedly in a better place than what it was. But at this point in time, I guess Betty got to a point where she realized how much she sacrificed, and probably Dan wasn't showing much appreciation. That's my assumption. That's what I'm gathering, which is probably why she was so angry and volatile towards him. Nevertheless, Dan's brother Larry corroborated the account and revealed Dan didn't pay much attention to her. The more it happened, the more he would tune out. Kim also alleged to the newspaper that Betty was always telling me they were getting a divorce. She'd say, "Who are you going to live with?" I was dying for Dad to divorce her. I'd say to Dad, "Just take me the day you leave." Okay. So 1983, Dan hires an assistant. It appears that Dan and Betty's marriage took a turn for the worse. In 1983, when Dan hired a new legal assistant, 𝓜𝓸𝓬𝓱𝓪'𝓼. Betty alleged to San Diego Reader that while at the cocktail party, she overheard her husband say, "Wow, isn't she beautiful?" She believed that Dan was talking about a receptionist in his building, and her fears were confirmed when her husband hired 𝓜𝓬𝓬 as the new assistant. 98.3 was like an axe through my life. 1983. Okay, it was like an axe through my life. So 1983 basically was when things really took a turn for the worse. Now, this just goes to show you what type of guy Dan was. The fact that he felt so freely to compliment another woman in his wife's presence. Anytime a man is that comfortable complimenting a woman in front of you, that pretty much shows you the lack of respect thereof that he has for you as his wife, as a significant other. So that already was a major red flag. So moving on, November 1983, Betty gets suspicious on Dan's 39th birthday. Now, it even shows this part within the movie, y'all, in both movies. So again, I really want y'all to check out these movies. So despite having her suspicions that her husband was having an affair, Dan kept refuting the accusations over and over. She wanted to believe him, so basically Betty had got suspicions. You know, these men are not good cheaters. They make it so obvious. You know, not picking up their phone as much. Every time you stop by to check on them, they're not there. You know, all the red flags are there. You can't overlook it. But nevertheless, she decided to surprise him on his 39th birthday by arriving to his office unannounced. Betty was told by the receptionist that Dan and Linda had left about 11 a.m. and hadn't yet returned. Okay, so everybody in this law firm, it even showed in the movie, they knew that Dan was being inappropriate with his receptionist. But of course, people want to keep their jobs, so nobody, you know what I'm saying, want to blow the whistle, righteously so. Betty waited in her husband's office and told the publication. They never came back. And when she saw a refrigerator and her wedding crystal and all the imported wine and the stereo and the picture on the desk, only it was a picture that was taken of him before they were married. Convinced that Dan was having an affair, Betty returned home, set fire to her husband's clothing in their backyard and told him to move out. However, Dan wouldn't leave and Broderick's muddled along with family life for a little longer. So, at this point, this infuriated her. Okay, this is when you see the goddamn ship sinking. Okay, when a man is not really acknowledging you as his wife. Little things. He doesn't have a picture of y'all wedding picture in his office. You know, the changes in his behavior. Betty, because she was so in love with her husband, she paid attention to everything. So, little shit he was doing, it was not getting past Betty. Because that's just how much love and energy she put into him. So she would notice his every little move, like this dude is living foul. Okay? So she's noticing and observing everything. She confronts him. Like any other man, he lies, he denies it. I don't know what you're talking about, man. I don't even like that girl like that. You know what I'm saying? I mean, she cool and all, but she ain't even my type. Oh, they quit to say she ain't my type. She ain't even my type. I ain't even into her like that. Nigga, like, a female got to be your type for you to smash her. Shit, niggas, listen, they smash gremlins and Shrek looking bitches all the time. You know what I mean? So I ain't trying to hear any of that. But he denied it. And because she was so in love with him, she gave him a pass. That's how it be when you be so in love with them. And unfortunately, it ends up backfiring, giving him that pass. So anyway, she decided to hang in there a little longer. After she confronted him, no, baby, it wasn't me. It wasn't me. It wasn't me. Y'all remember the song by Shaggy? It wasn't me. So, anyway, she kept going on trying to preserve her marriage, all right? So, February 1985, Dan finally moves out, y'all. This is when the heat starts getting turned up. This is when the engine really starts roaring, okay? The Brodericks had moved into a rental property after structural damage was discovered in the house in 1984. 3 months after his 40th birthday, Dan moved out, returning to the damaged Coral Reef house, okay? Even though Betty was sure he'd been having an affair with Linda, Dan continued to deny. And I've heard guys say that. I've heard men say, even if you know you did it, deny. As long as you don't see it, just keep denying it. And by Dan being a liar, because lawyers are professional liars, not lawyer, liar. He knew how to keep manipulating and gaslighting, okay? So, he literally walked out 3 months after his 40th birthday with the red Corvette and a 21-year-old. Are we the American joke or not? If you weren't my husband, I think you were really funny. He's got a scarf around his neck and he wanted those Ray-Ban sunglasses from Risky Business. Now, this is when Mr. Broderick really started smelling himself, honey. He was already making bread. He was the baddest lawyers in San Diego, top-notch, you know, well-respected, you know, he had a lot of clout, had a lot of power, so honey, it got to his ego. The bigger his wallets got, the bigger his ego inflated, honey. And some of these guys, they do that. Ask Kevin Hunter, Wendy Williams' ex-husband. the more Wendy started rolling in them checks, Kevin Hunter was right there rubbing his hands together like, yep, buddy. Yep, buddy. It's getting big. It's getting big. Just milking it up. You feel me? So that's what Dan Broderick did. You know, he started smelling himself. You know what I mean? This side chick started stroking their ego, and that's when you could tell a man is messing around. Because they start becoming very cocky with you. They start being very angry with you. They no longer have patience with you. Everything you do starts to irritate them. You know, they become more and more distant from you sexually, emotionally, physically. You know, you getting up in the morning, making him breakfast. He don't want to drink his coffee. Just little shit. You know, you try to make plans, come and meet for lunch. Nah, I'm busy. I got meetings. He's becoming more and more and more disconnected. Then it's worse when they got money, y'all. It's much worse. The ego really gets the best of them. Money makes you more what you are. If you're a broke asshole, you're going to be a rich asshole. Okay? If you are a broke hoe, you're going to be a rich hoe. Okay? Money just enhances more of your bad qualities. Okay? So he goes out and gets a red Corvette, trying to, you know, he basically redid his swag all of a sudden. You know what I mean? He wants to act like a young stud. Back in the day, it was called a stud. I don't know what they call these guys now. But back in the 80s, it was like, it's called stud, which is known as swag now. Okay, so he was a stud, all right. Started smelling himself, wearing the Ray-Ban sunglasses. Ray-Bans are hella expensive, even to these days. Ray-Bans are expensive. I know, because my husband got like 2 pair, and he treasured them shits like, you know, he bought them with a Mega Million goddamn ticket. Anything happen to those glasses, I'll never hear the end of it. Anywho, he just started smelling himself, you know, getting cocky. He revealed to San Diego Reader, that was the magazine back then, y'all. San Diego Reader, just to let y'all know, if y'all hear that a lot, that was a big time magazine back in that era. So he revealed to them that he moved out. Danny would leave all 4 children at his place without warning and say, here, they're yours. You want to be apart from me? Well, see what it's like raising a family by yourself. The abandonment would later negatively impact Betty's custody battle. So at this point, everybody's looking at Betty in a bad light, where I don't look at her in that way. I just think at this point she felt defeated. She was running out of things to do to make Dan understand where she was coming from. And one thing about a man, once another bitch has got her claws all the way into him, you can't even pull the shits out, okay? It's just like, you know what I mean? And at this point, Dan had made it up in his mind that he was done. He was through. He wasn't feeling Betty anymore. And Betty was crying out to be heard. And sometimes as a woman, when you so badly want your marriage or your relationship to work, and a man keeps being combative, fighting you and going against you, rather not just fighting you verbally, fighting you mentally and emotionally, and you like, look, I really want this to work. I really do not want us to give up on this. I've invested too much. You've invested too much. I don't want to lose this. And that's where Betty was. She saw it like a ball rolling down the hill. You know, like a ball rolling down the hill, you're trying to run behind it to catch the ball, and you can't, because it's just going faster, 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 faster. And I think that was going on with Dan. He became that ball rolling down the hill. Betty could not catch him. She could not bring him back into reality, honey. That young cooch had his ass going, baby. Okay? And ironically, y'all, 𝓜𝓸𝓬𝓱𝓪'𝓼, the woman he was dealing with, she looked at like an exact young replica of Betty Broderick. I promise you not. If I have the energy, I'm gonna put the pictures in this. I'm gonna edit. I might edit it. I might end up having to do that, which means it's gonna take even longer to goddamn upload. But nevertheless, so at this point, ladies, she got so furious she left the kids on him. And I don't think she did that because she didn't love her kids or didn't care about the kids. Shit, I've been doing it all this time. And you think you're going to be a stud dud? You're going to be a stud riding around in your red Corvette with this young chick acting like You know what I mean? I don't even exist. This family does not exist. Here you go, buddy. Here's your children. You do the hard work. I've been doing the hard work for years, keeping these babies, keeping our children, holding it down so your ungrateful ass could get through your malpractice and get through attorney school or whatever. You deal with it, okay? Because again, she's feeling defeated. She don't know what else to do to make this man understand you doing me dirty, and I'm tired of it. So at this point, she's doing whatever she can. But the problem is, ladies, you got to realize when your emotions get the best of you, sometimes even though you may have good reason, you still got to use your head and not your heart, because it can backfire. And in Betty's point, in Betty's right, it did. So 1985 in June, Betty allegedly becomes violent. Dan revealed this personally before his death, that when they were separated, Betty would come into the house whenever she wanted to. She started getting on rampages, throwing stuff through the windows, breaking mirrors, spray painting the walls, unbelievable things, because she was so hurt and distraught. And she could not break Dan. And let me tell you something. One thing about these men, when they get on these asshole egotistical trips, there's nothing you can do to break these men. And I think it was driving her even more crazier, because everything she was trying to do, and I knew what she was doing. And a lot of women have the tendency, he hurt me, I want him to see how it feels for him to get hurt. I want him to be hurt like I hurt. And this woman have to understand, a man would never hurt like you hurt when you're trying to retaliate and when you're trying to get back, because men are not emotionally wired like women. Okay, so how we receive pain, they receive it differently. Now, this is not to say that men can't never hurt, but they just don't hurt to the level in which we would as women, because we are two totally different species. And when it comes to emotions anyway. So, that's why Betty was on this demonic rampage, going to his house unannounced, breaking up his shit and stuff, because she like, you broke up our family. You broke up our future. You broke up our legacy. You destroyed everything. So I'm going to destroy your shit. That's what she was thinking, y'all. That's what I'm thinking was going on in her state of mind. So, Dan contacted the police, but as he was residing in their formerly shared property, there was nothing the law could do. Okay, because the property at that time was in both of their names, so there was like nothing he could do, you know. Sorry, y'all, I had a little call. But back to the story. So, September 23rd, 1985, he finally files for divorce. I guess he like, I'm sick of this shit. I'm sick of this bitch having access to pop up anytime she wants. Let me just divorce her ass so I ain't got to deal with it. So, prior to filing, he allegedly wanted Betty to be paying her own bills, and he agreed a monthly allowance of $9,000 with her. Betty revealed that she was surprised when Dan filed for divorce, despite the fact that the couple had been living apart for several months. She told the San Diego Reader, I give everyone the benefit of the doubt until they come up and shoot me between the eyes. So I was real surprised and upset. So I think Betty was trying to stall and hang in there, thinking, okay, maybe once he gets through this change. And he said it in an interview. I remember, if you YouTube the Betty Broderick interview, she said it. She figured like this was a phase of, you know, him wanting to go out there and explore, and evidently this was not a phase. This was something he really chose that he wanted to do. This was not something he was just doing during his what's the male crisis or whatever. So Los Angeles Times reported Betty's concerning behavior continued, and she would return to the property. She won't share it with him. Per Dan's report, she took a cream pie from the kitchen and smeared it all over the master bedroom. That happened in the movie. 4 days later, he said she threw bottles of wine through windows and smashed a sliding glass. As a result, Dan took out a restraining order against Betty and filed criminal contempt charges. That part was in the movie where the situation with the cake, what happened was Betty went over there, I guess because her kids was there, or either she used the kids as an excuse to come over there, and she saw the Boston cream pie sitting on the kitchen table. And I guess she asked, oh, where did that pie come from, or whatever. And one of the kids was like, oh, Linda made it. That's the side chick name. Linda made it. And Betty was furious. She went bonkers. She took that cake and smeared it all over the bedroom and shit. That's just how much she derailed off of Dan no longer wanting her. She could not handle it, okay? So she just kept returning, doing all kind of malicious things out of anger and out of frustration that Dan had made it very clear he no longer wanted her or their marriage. So February 1986, Dan sells their former home and all bets are off. As Dan was the top-notch lawyer, okay, well-known, well-respected, Betty allegedly found it difficult to find adequate representation. Listen, Dan had a lot of goddamn juice, yo. He had so much juice, all right? She couldn't even find a lawyer that wanted to go up against his ass. That's how bad it was, okay? Everything came to a head in February 1986 when Dan convinced the judge to allow him to sell the couple's former property without Betty's consent. So this nigga was able to pull all type of shady ass, grimy ass moves because of who he was and the fact that he had so much clout with a lot of people within the law circle, the judges, other attorneys. Again, Betty felt defeated. She could not do shit with him. She couldn't do nothing. She couldn't touch him. He was able to get away with doing a lot of shit, and basically there was nothing she could do. Upon finding out Dan sold their home without her permission, she drove a car into the front door of Dan's new house. I mean, at this point, Betty literally lost it. This man just keeps getting over, left for marriage, left with another woman. Her kids are around this other woman, and Dan has become cold as ice at this point. So again, she just her anger kept accelerating at this point. So she drove her car in the front, actually through Dan's new house. They should have part in the movie too. Dan declared that when he opened the door to pull Betty out, she reached for a large butcher knife under the seat. He restrained her, and she went 3 days in a mental health hospital. So at this point, Betty is going crazy. I don't think she's really crazy. I think she's on an emotional roller coaster. Because if she was crazy, she wouldn't have had the sense to take care of their children, hold him down while he went to school all these years and stuff. She didn't start acting like this until Dan started pushing for this divorce. Okay, that's when all the crazy really started coming out. So 1986 of July, the divorce is finalized, and Dan receives sole custody. Because remember, she got so angry, she left the kids on him. So he used that to his advantage. That's why, ladies, you got to be careful when you allow your emotions to get best of you. There was no custody hearing, and Dan and the judge cut a deal behind her back. Again, he had a lot of power, a lot of clout. Be careful running after men with a lot of money, ladies. When they know the judges, they know the clerks. I know a lot of females who were with men in the industry. You better ask Ludacris, the rapper, baby mama, how he ended up getting custody of their daughter. And she was the one who predominantly raised that little girl. He got full custody of that daughter with his wife. Okay? Men with money can literally F you up. So why you think you're going to secure the bag, be careful, because sometimes the tables can reverse and they could actually take your children from you. Okay? Men with money have a lot of power. They have a lot of clout. So keep that in mind before you get pregnant from a millionaire or big time baller shot caller. So following the divorce, Betty's behavior worsened, especially when he kept going more and more public with his relationship with Coquina. So Dan was not slowly pulling the knife, pushing a knife and Betty's back. He was just, he was puncturing the hell out of her, okay? Emotionally and mentally. She chose obscene nicknames for Dan and Linda and used them in frequent messages on the answer machine. So Dan began to withhold $100 for every obscene word she used, $250 for each time she set foot on his property, $500 for every entry into his house. According to the publication, Betty also left dozens of profane and often sexually explicit messages. At this point, she's consistently derailing, ladies, because Dan is steady going on happy-go-lucky with his life. And he just does not care. So he upped the ante by charging her and deducting money from out the allotment he was sending her every month. So if she would use a curse word, he would charge $100. If she came anywhere near his house, he would take a $250. Every time she entered his house unannounced, he would deduct $500. Dan was hell. He was a hellion, yo. Oh my gosh. This crazy that the man you've been making love to all these years, the man who you've been bearing children with all of these years, to see him go to evil Knievel. Oh my gosh. I could only imagine. Dan wrote Betty a letter regarding her actions. I know your first impulse upon reading this letter will be a violent one. You have told the kids that if I will hold any money this month, you will kill me and see that not a brick is left standing in my house. Meanwhile, in an interview with the San Diego Reader, Betty said, I am madder than hell, and I want to kill him for being lied to and cheated. But that was nothing to do with being crazy. It was also reported that Betty was sent a photo of her ex with his new bow in the mail, along with the note which said, eat your heart out, bitch. Linda refused to return Betty's wedding china, even after purchasing new dishes of her own. An action Kim confirms, which further seemed to aggravate matters. So the side chick is getting a rise out of this, honey. Yeah, nana nana boo boo, I got your man. What's the rap song? That's some boom, I got your boyfriend. I got your man. Boom, I got your boyfriend. In this case, boom, I got your husband. I got your man. Boom, I got your husband. I mean, she was milking it up, honey. Some of these bitches be milking it up, and these men be giving them all the room to milk it up. It's just interesting, wow. So, 1989, Dan and Linda married. With his divorce from Betty finalized, Dan proposed to Linda in June 1988. Couple got married in the front yard April 22nd, 1989. Dan hired undercover security guards because he was afraid. And after, I mean, righteously so, because Betty was not playing with his ass. Linda insisted for him to wear a bulletproof vest because they knew Betty was off the chain, but he refused to wear a bulletproof vest. He reportedly believed that as he was paying all her expenses, Betty wouldn't murder him. So he was under the impression, as long as he was giving Betty money, Betty would be cool. She wouldn't take it that far. So he thought. November 5th, 1989, y'all. This was when it all went down. Okay? So, November 1989, 4 days before Betty's 42nd birthday. And believe it or not, me and Betty got the same birthday. November 7th. Listen, Scorpios, we staying hard. Don't play with us, okay? So, Dan had threatened to file criminal contempt charges over his ex-wife's offensive answer phone messages. According to the publication, it might have been this act that set Betty on the path to murder. Early on November 5th, 1989, Betty reportedly drove to Dan and Linda's home near San Diego and let herself in with her daughter's key. So her daughter, you know, her kids will come back and forth. Her oldest daughter missed and left her key laying around, that the key that belonged to the property of the house. And Dan would always tell his children, whatever you do, please, please, please keep up with these keys. Do not let your mother get a hold of these keys. But, you know, that didn't happen, and that gave Betty access to do what she ended up doing. So Betty used her .38 caliber 5-shot revolver to shoot Linda and Dan as they were sleeping. One bullet hit a bedside table. Another pounded into the wall. But 3 bullets strike the sleeping couple. One pierced Linda's neck and lodged into her brain. So she definitely had no chances of survival. Another hit her in the chest. Oh, I didn't know Linda got striked 3 times. So her neck and her brain and her chest. Yes. Betty was pissed with her ass. She was pissed. She wanted to make sure she took her out. Third, perforated Dan's back, fracturing a rib and tearing through his right lung. Broderick had bought the gun a month before her husband remarried. Linda apparently died instantly. Dan reached for the phone, and you will see this scene demonstrated in the movie. As Dan tried to reach for the phone, Betty snatched the phone out the wall and ran off with it. And she later surrendered herself to the police. Okay, so while he was breathing his last breath and tried to attempt to make that call, she yanked that phone from his ass. Okay, so that's the last thing he remembered before he went to meet his maker. Okay, November 20th, the first trial is declared a mistrial. So basically, Betty's attorney basically tried to convince the jurors that Betty did not do this because she's a bad, terrible woman. She was manipulated. She was lied to. She felt defeated because her husband had a lot of pull, had a lot of power, had a lot of clout. That was the narrative her lawyer tried to run with. So she almost got away with it. It was a hung jury. She almost got away with it at that time. But nevertheless, the second trial, she was found guilty. She was found guilty on 2 counts of second-degree murder and was sentenced to 32 years to life in prison. So Betty Broderick right now, y'all, her age, because I know it's been so long. So her age is 75 years. She is 75 years old, and she is still currently doing time. I'm trying to figure out which prison she's in, and she's been getting a lot of support. I'm actually a supporter of Betty Broderick on Facebook. She has her own personal chat room or whatever. She's not actually in there. It's somebody who supports her, who's actually over the chat room. And you know, I just wished Betty Broderick a happy birthday this past November, because like I said, both our birthdays are on the same date. So, you know, I still got love for Betty Broderick. I mean, I can totally understand. I can totally understand. But we're going to get more into it. So she's currently incarcerated. I'm trying to see what prison she's currently incarcerated in. Oh, by the way, Linda and Dan are buried together, side by side, at Greenwood Memorial Park. Okay. So to this day, Betty has no remorse. She said it. She does not feel bad. People really wanted Betty to apologize, and they felt like if she would have just apologized, that the courts would have spared her some leniency. And she was like, fuck no, I'm not apologizing. I meant to kill her, and I meant to kill him, and I'll do the shit again. That's called being a true Scorpio. Scorpios, we don't feel bad once we decide to pull that trigger, and I don't mean literally in some instances, unlike Betty. But once you rub us the wrong way, we don't give a damn no more. So her purpose of going over there, she wanted to be heard. She wanted to really let them know, I'm tired of y'all doing this to me. I'm tired of y'all dragging me. And the moment Linda told her, you need to get the hell out of here, all hell broke loose. Betty felt like, damn, I cannot get nowhere. I'm not being heard at all. I'm not being respected. Nobody just gives a damn about me. And there's nothing I can do to make anyone understand. She is currently being serving her sentence at California Institution for Women in Chino, California. She was sentenced to 2 consecutive terms of 15 years to life, plus 2 years for illegal use of firearm. So at this point, all of her children are grown. She has had grandchildren and all of that. Her children, I guess 1 or 2 of them were trying to fight to get her released. That has not happened. So I'm not going to go all into the details of that, but I will say this much. Betty has no remorse for what she has done. Of course, Kokenia, the side chick's family, of course, you know, they resent Betty to this day. I mean, I get it. They lost a loved one. But at the same time, with all due respect, Linda Kokenia did not give a damn that she played a part. And righteously so. It was really Dan's fault. Dan brought Linda in. Linda would have never been brought into Betty's life had he not handled matters in the way he did. But of course, Betty was so angry she couldn't see past the smoke. She had smoke for Linda and Dan, and the fact that Linda was acting just as cocky and arrogant as Dan, like, fuck you, bitch, yes, I got your husband, get over it. I'm going to continue the life that you wish you would have been able to continue with your husband. I'm going to take matters from here. I'm going to pick up where you left off, and I'm going to finish living this life. Now, mind you, Linda was 21 at the time when she was with Dan. So, of course, she would have had his babies. They would have continued this life. But we don't know how things could have went, and Betty didn't give it a chance to find out because she was so hurt. Eventually, they probably would have ended up divorced because he probably would have did the same thing to Linda. In most cases, this is what ends up happening. But at this point, Betty was so furious, she didn't care about that. She wanted both of them to hurt like she was hurting. Dan was a married man, you know, and again, this is a chance you take as a side chick. These men sometimes give the side chicks delusional confidence. And because he doesn't respect her as a side chick, the side chick is definitely not going to respect her. Linda saw that Dan did not respect Betty, so she damn sure wasn't going to respect Betty either. And unfortunately, that's how her life got taken in the process. So you take a chance following up behind these married men, they could get you hurt. Linda, from my understanding, she was the youngest of 4 sisters, and she was also raised by Danish parents who immigrated in the 1950s. She was 11 years old when her mother died of cancer, and her father remarried shortly thereafter. Kokenia's older sister said she recalled how they prayed before every meal. They was raised to be housewives. So Linda was raised to be very catering, very docile, pretty much like Betty. You know, you go along with what the man says. You do what the man tells you to do. 81, Linda Kokenia became a Delta Airlines stewardess before she was fired the following year for conduct unbecoming of Delta employees. So she did some bullshit that got her fired. She probably messing with somebody's husband then too. Anyway, Kokenia and 4 friends were on an off-duty skiing trip when she and a male passenger was seen kissing and sneaking into the bathroom. After working briefly for an attorney in Atlanta, Kokenia followed a boyfriend to San Diego, California. It was there that the 21-year-old met Dan Broderick, Betty's husband, while working at his law firm. He had been with his wife Betty since the mid-50s. A Catholic herself, Betty supported her husband during his time in law and medical, so I already explained that to y'all. I'm not going through all that. So I'm just trying to give y'all more insight on the side chick Linda, the coleslaw, the appetizer. Betty told her husband to get rid of Linda. Now, during the Betty Broderick interview, y'all, I remembered Betty said that she told Dan to get rid of her because basically she knew, Betty, when you've been with these men for a long time, you know when they pulling some slick shit. And Betty just never cared for the fact that Dan hired her from the beginning. Now, initially, Dan, like Betty said, because you know her husband, Dan was always a one-man band. He wanted to do everything himself. So when he decided to hire this woman, at first, well, before Betty found out it was a woman, and Dan came to her and said he hired some extra help, the first initial reaction, Betty was like, oh, cool, you finally hiring somebody to help you. That's good. Now you can spend more time with me and the kids. You ain't always having to be the one to do every goddamn thing. So initially, Betty was all for it till she found out it was the bitch that Dan had said was such a beautiful woman at the damn function. When she found out it was her that Dan hired, she said, "Oh, hell no. You doing something slick." What woman wouldn't have felt some type of way? So she gave Dan an ultimatum. Get rid of that bitch. Because why are you even hiring her? Because even Betty stated the woman had no law experience with law. She couldn't even type. She wasn't no real secretary. Betty knew her husband was pulling some slick shit when he hired Linda. Okay, because Linda knew nothing about the law. She was only 21. It was some bullshit. So that was, anyway, that's when she moved in, and I already told y'all all of that. The cruelty between the Brodericks with Coquina in the middle continued. So she took a chance getting involved with this married man, honey. Linda even went so far as to mailing advertisements for wrinkle cream and weight loss products to Betty. And she probably did, because side chicks could be very malicious, especially when they done won your husband. They really, they balls get even bigger then, because like, bitch, what you gonna do? I'm already fucking your husband and I'm with him. Get over yourself. So yeah, child. Anyhow, both of them are buried side by side to this day, which I already told y'all that. So anyway, getting to the lesson at hand, okay? Since it's already long, I'm not going to be able to mention the Carla Harris. I'm going to do a part 2 series on this, because it's just going to be way too long at this point if I bring up her. So I'm going to save a part 2 for Clara Harris as to what drove her to run over her husband multiple times when she caught him banging his secretary. But nevertheless, I am going to say this, and of course I'm going to have to re-upload and do a part 2, because it's just too much to try to tie in with Clara Harris. So we're going to save her as a part 2. So nevertheless, just to give a few lessons in this situation here, Betty made the decision she made. Unfortunately, she put herself in a position in which she gave Dan way too much power to be able to finesse her the way that he did. And this is the chance we take, unfortunately, when you make a man so much of your world, you don't protect yourself. She put herself in a position in which she was easily able to become the discarded wife. And because she put so much into him. And there's nothing wrong with loving a husband and being his backbone, but when you pretty much surround your life around them, you put yourself in a disastrous situation. Because when you make a man your everything and he no longer wants you, he does not feel the desire to keep you, you easily make yourself discardable. And that's what happened. Betty made her whole life around just being Dan's wife. And there's a lot of women who have done this, and they have paid the price. When you make your husband your everything. Wendy Williams not only made her husband her everything, she also made him her manager. And sometimes it's good, but in most cases it's bad. Mary J. Blige did the same thing. She made her husband her manager. When you allow these men to be over your assets, they're allowed to be over your business, your career. It's very risky, because in an event things don't work out, things go left, these men have a lot of power over your money, and in most cases they use it in an evil ass way, you know what I mean? especially when you start catching on to the bullshit. Believe it or not, a lot of these men love it when you asleep. They love when you hibernate. When you start waking up on their ass, that's when you start dealing with all the gaslighting. Now they want to be vindictive because they so used to you being dumb. And now that you wise and you are putting a stop to what's going on, they can't handle it. You know, that's when it gets really nasty. That's when lawyers start getting involved. That's when it just really starts going all the way left. So what Betty did was she just made him her everything. And that's why I have a problem with women who always be on this. My husband is this, my husband. I don't give a damn about that. You know what I mean? Granted, I'm a married woman. I've been married for 23 years. I don't brag on my husband. I don't put him on a pedestal. Okay? Because truth be told, my husband has done things that has really pissed me off and rubbed me the wrong way as his wife. You know what I mean? So I can never just really put him up there like that, you know, because I know that he can disappoint me. And that's the reality that a lot of women have to understand. These men can disappoint you. Now, I'm not going to be crazy and put all my business out there because, you know, a lot of these women, they be low-key hating on us married women. So the moment you try to be transparent and you share some shit, and it's not because, you know, you don't want to keep it 100, but some of these women are very vindictive. They'll use it against you. You know what I mean? And I understand that marriage is not perfect. Marriage is not supposed to be perfect. But you got some women out here that be low-key hating and be wanting you to reveal any type of negative things. That way they can penalize you. See, that's why I don't want to be married. That's just why blah, blah, blah. And marriage is not perfect. It's what you make of it. And yes, every once in a while, these men will get out of line. And as women, we get out of line. But it comes a point where somebody has to have a clear mind in the situation, or else you're going to jump off the deep end like Dan did. Dan and Betty, both of them jumped off the deep end. He just meant he was going to be with this woman by any means necessary. And if that meant dragging Betty, and that's basically, you know, Betty's lawyer did bring up a good point. He did say, when I watched the documentary, Dan was a lawyer. He knew exactly what he was doing. Okay, so what he was doing a lot of shit to make Betty go crazy. And I think, like the lawyer said, what Dan was hoping to do, and it did not go that way, drive her so goddamn crazy to the point she can't take it no more, that she ends up killing herself. That's what Dan, because remember, he's a lawyer. And not only that, he's a man. And men could be very emotionless, especially when they get on that egotistical mode in which I don't give a fuck. I want this bitch to self-destruct. I want to be with this other woman, or I want to move on with my life. I don't care if she kill herself. Some men could get just that cold that they don't care if you take yourself out. And I think that's what he was aiming for, because he wanted this new life so badly. He didn't give a shit what Betty did to herself. But what he did not expect was Betty to come after him and to come after Linda, because he was just that sure of himself. He had just that much pride. He was just that biggity. She ain't gonna do shit. I got her. I'm giving her money. You got some men who think that way. You got some men who think as long as I'm giving her $1, that bitch ain't gonna holler. She'll shut the fuck up as long as I'm putting money in her account. And for Betty, it was bigger than that. I don't want your money. I want you to be a husband. I'm used to us having money. I'm used to the house. I'm used to the cars. I want us to continue building our legacy, raising these children together. Dan wanted his red Corvette and his young tenderoni. Betty got old for him. And see what it was? Not only Betty was old, Betty got hip to the bullshit. And she kept calling his ass out. And when you start calling their ass out on the bullshit, oh honey, they don't want you no more. When you start waking up and getting wise, and then I woke up, okay, that's when they can't be with you. They love when you dumb. They love when you don't know shit. They love when you let them do shit. You know what I'm saying? And she got tired of that, you know. So, you know, that's what ended up happening. But I'm going to break this up into 3 parts. Because the plan was to do this content with Betty, talking about the events that led up to the demise of Dan's and Linda's passing and the demise of the marriage. I was going to include that and include Clara Harris. The content is too long. And I was going to also break down what women can do to avoid putting themselves in this type of situation. I can't do it. It's too long. It's too much. And people start losing interest when you make things too long. You know, people got a short attention span. I know I do. I don't want to drag it out, so I'm gonna bring it up. I'm gonna do a 3-part series, ladies. Okay, so this is part 1. I'm gonna do part 2. That's gonna be the next content upload where I talk about Clara Harris, the events of her marriage that led up to the demise of her taking her husband's life. And I'm gonna do a part 3 in how women could avoid and the steps you can take in preventing getting yourself in a situation, and what ultimately leads women to end up derailing to this point. So I'm going to save that for part 3. So anyway, y'all, I'm going to get ready to shut it down, ladies. It is your girl. It is your diva in knowledge, Lady Mocha, representing Mocha's Ladies Lounge, y'all. I appreciate the love. Y'all been subscribing. Y'all been liking the videos. I so appreciate it. So we're going to do 2 more parts to this situation and becoming the discarded wife, okay? So y'all look out for the part 2. Leave y'all comment below. Let me know what y'all think. Is there anything I should have mentioned in this part 1 before I go to part 2? Please let me know. Leave it in the comments below. So anyway, y'all, it is your girl Diva in Knowledge. I'm going to shut it down. And until next time, y'all be blessed. Please make sure y'all like the video. That's how my video goes into the algorithms when y'all actually hit that thumb up. So please look out. If you can't Cash App, you can't donate, please hit that like button and share the video. I would gladly appreciate it, ladies. So until then, y'all take care, and y'all look out for The Discarded Wife part 2, Clara Harris. Okay, so y'all look out for that. Y'all take care, and y'all enjoy y'all Christmas, y'all. Don't go broke trying to splurge on these children because it's Christmas. Don't go broke over a holiday. Do what you can, and whatever you can't do, at least cook a good meal. Okay, so if you can't buy your kids no gifts, I get it, the struggle is real. Cook a good meal. Make them their favorite cake. Buy a nice cake. All right, y'all. Don't go broke trying to keep up with the tradition of Christmas. All right, so anyway, y'all take care. I'll holler at y'all soon. I'm out.